In our infamous decision series, we talked about the cases the Supreme Court got seriously wrong. Here is one that they got right. Upholding the Constitution. Racial Integrity Act. Welcome to Into the Desert, exploring the wilderness of ideas. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and if you want to support our channel and our mission of encouraging discussion, not division, please join us on Patreon. The link is in the description. In a previous video, we discussed how the now discredited science of eugenics was very popular in both the scientific community and the general public during the first half of the 20th century. As a result, it spurred two pieces of legislation in Virginia in 1924. One was the Sterilization Act, which resulted in a test case backed by eugenicists, Buck versus Bell, the subject of a fourth infamous decision. Following the Supreme Court's upholding of that law, eugenics laws were passed in 32 other states. The other piece of eugenics legislation passed by Virginia in 1924 was the Racial Integrity Act. Given eugenicists' concern with promoting only those with good genes to reproduce and preserving the purity of the gene pool, the Racial Integrity Act stated,
"It shall hereafter be unlawful for any white person in this state to marry any save a white person, or a person with no other admixture of blood than white and American Indian. For the purpose of this act, the term white person shall apply only to the person who has no trace whatsoever of any blood other than Caucasian. But persons who have 1/16 or less of the blood of the American Indian and have no other non-Caucasic blood shall be deemed to be white persons. All laws heretofore passed, and now in effect regarding the intermarriage of white and colored persons, shall apply to marriages prohibited by this act."
Given the history of racism in Virginia, eugenicists did not think they needed a test case, as they did with the Sterilization Act. So the law did not face an immediate challenge. But eventually, a challenge did come. In 1958, Mildred Jeter and Richard Loving decided to marry. Jeter was black and Loving was white. This was illegal in their state of Virginia, so they were married in the District of Columbia. When they returned, the police broke down their door while they were sleeping and arrested them. Richard was released on bail, though Mildred, even though she was pregnant, was kept in jail for a week. They were found guilty of violating the Racial Integrity Act and sentenced to 1 year in prison. However, the sentence was suspended on the condition that they leave the state for 25 years. Eventually, this case reached the Supreme Court in Loving v. Virginia, 1967. Unlike Carrie Bell in Buck versus Bell, 1927, the Lovings had three things in their favor. First, the law was based on so-called scientific eugenics, but following World War II, eugenics was discredited and no longer accepted. Second, the Supreme Court had already ruled in Brown versus Board of Education and other cases that there were no legitimate grounds to base laws on race. Finally, the trend in the country was against such laws, for in the previous 15 years, 14 states had repealed similar laws, leaving only 16 states, including Virginia, with such laws. To make things even worse for the state of Virginia, Chief Justice Earl Warren noted the inconsistency in the law.
Appellants point out that the state's concern in these statutes, as expressed in the words of the 1924 Act's title, an act to preserve racial integrity, extends only to the integrity of the white race, while Virginia prohibits whites from marrying any non-white, subject to the exception for the descendants of Pocahontas. Negroes, Orientals, and any other racial class may intermarry without statutory interference.
In the end, Warren didn't even need to consider the inconsistency. The law was unconstitutional without it.
Because we find the racial classifications in these statutes repugnant to the 14th Amendment, even assuming an even-handed state purpose to protect the integrity of all races.
The decision was unanimous. Justice Stewart then added,
I have previously expressed the belief that it is simply not possible for a state law to be valid under our Constitution, which makes the criminality of an act depend upon the race of the actor. McLaughlin versus Florida, 379 U.S. 184, 379 U.S. 198, concurring opinion. Because I adhere to that belief, I concur in the judgment of the court.
Thus, the court ruled the Racial Integrity Act unconstitutional and rejected laws seeking to restrict interracial marriage.